right about there when I realized I was going to be flying on the very edge of my flying ability and mental capacity. Hey everybody, and welcome aboard Archer November 3149er Quebec. The Archer is a bit different than the usual ride that we use for these videos. It has more than double the power, almost double the weight, double the seats, and infinitely more IFR capability than my humble Cessna 140. A recent topic of discussion around the coffee table at Skylark was what we call the ILS approach to Skylark. Those of you who are familiar with our little airport know that we don't have an instrument approach. Fortunately for us, we're close enough to Bradley International to fly an approach to that airport, break out in marginal VFR conditions, and then shoot over to Skylark with special VFR clearance. On paper, it seemed like a great thing to go out and try, and an even better thing to record on video. The procedure is relatively simple. On your IFR flight plan, you file to KBDL. In the remarks section, state that you will be canceling and going over to 7 Bravo 6 upon reaching VMC. As discussed in one of my previous videos, there are usually 2 runways in use at Bradley, and one of them is almost always runway 33. This is a good thing for us because the ILS approach to runway 33 provides us with some great visual landmarks to find Skylark once we break out of the clouds. Approaches to any other runway at Bradley are usable. For the ILS 33, you are descending through about 1,000 feet when you cross I-91. See it on the chart? If you can't see the ground at that point, the weather is probably too low to sneak over to Skylark anyway. The general rule of thumb is if Bradley ATIS is advertising ceilings of less than 800 feet, you don't expect to make it to Skylark. This is about where the clouds were on this flight, and you'll see that it was very marginal. When you break out of the clouds, look for the highway and the bridge off your right wing. Make a sweeping right turn to line up for the 45 to downwind runway 28 or straight in for 10. Sounds simple enough? Well, that's what I thought so too. While we're getting vectored around at 3,000 feet on top of the clouds, let's brief the ILS 33 approach. This is the ILS runway 33 approach to Bradley International. Localizer frequency is 108.55. We have that in the NAV1. Final approach course is 328 degrees and the runway is adequate. We have the ATIS. We're talking to Bradley approach. Bradley Tower is in the standby 120.3. We're expecting vectors to the final approach outside of Haddock's intersection. We have the GPS tuned to the localizer for DME readout. Once we intercept the glide slope, we'll follow it down to minimums of 371. If the glide slope is unusable, localizer minimums are 580 inside of homing. On the mist, climb straight out to 4,000, right turn to the Westfield VOR, and hold on the 095 radial. Bradley approach gave us some unexpected news. There are a few jets inbound for the ILS 33, which means they can't give us special VFR to Skylark after the approach right away. They were accommodating, though, and gave us a few options. They said they could clear us to land at Bradley, and we could wait on the ground for special VFR release to Skylark. We could get vectored out of the way until they had room for us, or we could fly the approach once, go missed, and they should have room for us on the second time around. Looking for some practice, I went for this option. Here we go, ILS 33 round 1. This approach went fairly well, and better than the second one. I'll talk about that later. Regardless, this first approach was enough to boost my confidence. While you're in IMC, make small adjustments. Keep your scan going, use the autopilot if you have one, and when in doubt, just fly the airplane. Aviate, navigate, communicate always rings true. don't get so overwhelmed with managing the radios and talking to ATC that you forget to fly the airplane. That was a nice quick trip through the clouds. Now, you can't really see it on film, but Bradley's 12 o'clock, and I've got it in sight. The I-91 bridge is just off to the right, and we're crossing I-91, as discussed, right about now. You're going to notice that on the mist, I'm going to pull to the left and up. This is because ATC gave me a special vector that was in contrast to the brief mist approach procedure. I didn't just make it up. Back on top, Bradley says that they should be able to get us in for the special VFR clearance this time around. We'll just cut ahead to the approach. Now, I said that this one didn't go as well as the first. I think there was a combination of factors at play here. First, I spend almost all of my flying time in my little Cessna 140, flying VFR only. I rarely fly IFR, and I fly in IMC even less often. Of course, I was instrument current for this flight, but it had been months since I'd actually flown an approach, and almost a year since I had done it in IMC. While the cloud layer was thin and we weren't in IMC for very long, I'll admit that I was totally task saturated whenever I was in the clouds. Another factor was on this approach, I was expecting to circle to land at Skylark, not fly the approach all the way to Bradley like I was the first time. As a result, I fell victim to the temptation of looking outside and down to see if I could see something familiar, ask for my special VFR, and go home. I should have been completely focused on flying the approach as if I were going to land at Bradley, and only looked out when I was clear of the clouds. Have a look at the Nav1, and you'll see that I was flirting with the limits of the localizer almost the whole time I was in the clouds. While you can't see it on film, right about here I got visual contact with the ground, I-91, and the bridge. So here's my right turn back towards Skylark, and you're going to see the river and the I-91 bridge cut across the top of the instrument panel right about there. I've called Bradley and asked for a special VFR, which was approved as requested. A few seconds later, I had Skylark in sight, called them again, and canceled my IFR flight plan. The main lesson that I learned on this flight was that regardless of what you have for hours, ratings, or experience, none of it is valuable unless you're current. This is the trouble with flying IFR as a private pilot. Few of us little guys fly enough IFR to really be proficient at it. While I think everyone should have an instrument rating just for the training and experience, I think that anyone with an instrument rating needs to think hard about using it to punch through some clouds just because you've got to get there. How current and proficient are you really? Could you really fly an approach right down to minimum safely? Your certificate says yes, but maybe your recent experience says no. My advice to those of you with an instrument rating is if you're going on a cross country, even if it's on a beautiful day, file IFR and get in the system. That way, at least the programming and the process is familiar if you do need to fly in IMC. Then you just have to focus on flying the airplane. As for me, today, I need more practice before I take any students up in the clouds. Thanks for tagging along. Blue skies, and keep the shiny side up.